They have faith in two different shastras. For instance, many times people, especially in America, maybe not so much here, but there are so many born-again people from different religions. They're born again. There's the born-again there's a born-again evolutionist. It doesn't matter what you tell them, all they can think of is, whatever you tell them, they just translate into their evolutionist philosophy. They can't believe that anyone could believe anything other than evolution. Just like the devotee, wherever you tell him, he tries to see it from the point of view of Krishna consciousness. So for the born-again evolutionists or the born-again Christians, they have their authority, they have their scripture, and whatever you say, they simply translate it into their worldview, known as paradigm, and they simply give it back to you. They simply repeat it in a way that they think now you can understand it more perfectly from the higher point of view of Darwin or Freud or something else. So therefore, Shruteya Vibhina, there are so many scriptures, and therefore, unless you have the same scripture to discuss philosophy from, it is also a waste of time. And Asavari Shirya Jnani Bina. And every sage is speaking to a certain audience. No sage is for everyone. Krishna tried to be for everyone. For instance, he spoke Bhagavad Gita in such a way as to help encourage the karmis, those who are interested in fruitive activities. He has every karmi quotes Bhagavad Gita, karma nyeva dikaraste ma pale shukadachina ma karma pala hetu arbur mato stangasa karmani. Every person in India, he knows that verse backwards and forwards. You can do your duty, but just take what you need. God never says to stop doing our duties. That's the essence of Bhagavad Gita. I do my duty. That's all you have to do. Go to work, make your money, and provide for your family. Therefore, and then your life is perfect. And Krishna encourages the Jnani by saying, Jnani vat bhavanam janmanam ante jnanavam mam prapadyate. That the Jnani is the best of all the different types of persons who surrender to me. Krishna says the Jnani is the best. And he encourages the yogi, yoginam api sarvesham, and he encourages the bhakta. So Krishna is trying to encourage everyone, and even after speaking Bhagavad Gita, encouraging everyone, ultimately no one surrendered to Krishna practically. Prabhupada said there are so many editions in the Bhagavad Gita in the West. When he came, there were 25 different editions, actually 600 different editions. And after reading it, everyone took what they wanted from Krishna, and they forgot about him. They took what they wanted and tried to get rid of him. Generally, when you do that in the West, they call it plagiarism. But if you do it to Krishna, then it's called philosophy. Therefore, hearing from so many different sages, one will never get the right conclusion, because all one will hear is different conclusions. Everyone says they're the authority, everyone says, follow me. Therefore, mahajano yena kata sapanta. One has to choose some kind of some mahajan, some authority, but ultimately is said, dharmasya tatvam nihitam guhaya. If one wants to find out what is the real purpose of existence, or what is the reality of the material world, then mahajano yena kata sapanta. One has to follow some authority. One has to surrender, in other words. It's not enough, just in the Western world nowadays, it's called the eclectics. They say, yes, we appreciate everyone. This is one of the most popular philosophies. We take a little bit from everyone. We don't acknowledge anyone as our authority. That we simply borrow from everyone. We appreciate them. Once in a while, we thank them for it. And then we give them our combination, our smorgasbord philosophy, and we try to enlighten them. So there's no surrender. The only surrender ultimately is to what my mind concocts at that moment. And then the next moment it concocts something else and I surrender to that as divine. But if one wants to find out what is the real dharma, what is real virtue, then nihitam guhayam. It's hidden in the heart of a self-realized person. A self-realized person, he doesn't simply speak to anyone, he only speaks to someone who's actually going to benefit from it. Therefore, one has to mahajno yena kata sapanta, one has to surrender it perpadyante, one has to surrender. Otherwise, there's no real communication, there's no real benefit that happens. Prahlad Maharaj, he set the example here. The ritualistic activities he'll perform, people in general, they follow it because they, at least in the Vedic culture, the king, he was the leader. Of course, nowadays, who's the leader in modern society? Prabhupada said, in one purport, Prabhupada said, for the rock, people who follow rock music, then maybe the Rolling Stones, they're the Mahajans. For those who take drugs, maybe Timothy Leary is the Mahajan. For those who are interested in becoming a demon, maybe Hiranyakashipu or Ravana is the Mahajan. So people will take their own Mahajans and they'll follow it, because everyone will have to have some kind of leader. Of course, nowadays, Vivekananda may be the leader of those who are simply interested in speculating. But someone will be the leader. But if we want to really find out what the real truth is, we have to take a Krishna conscious devotee as the leader. So Prahlad Maharaj was such a person. He followed the Vedic culture, so the people would become elevated, those who are interested in following the king, and that was practically everyone. And for those who are devotees, then Prahlad Maharaj, Krishna is advising him as the devotee to always fix his mind upon him without any deviation, to always be engaged in rendering service to him according to the Vedic injunctions with his full intelligence, not to become deviated by some other idea. Therefore, to set a perfect example for the people in general, and at the same time always remain fixed in Krishna consciousness. And that way he would fulfill all his obligations, that there is no need for doing anything else. Prabhupada gives the verse here, Devar Shir Bhutatma Rinam Patrinam Nekingaro Yak Nayan Sharanam Charajan Rinam. That if one simply serves Krishna, then automatically all his obligations are fulfilled. Tarar Mula Tripta Vishechanena Triptyanti Tatskanda Bujo Prashaka. That if one waters the root of a tree, then automatically all the leaves and branches are automatically satisfied. So if one externally executes the rules and regulations of the Varna and Ashram system, and at the same time always meditates upon Krishna in devotional service and does his activities for Krishna's pleasure in full Krishna consciousness, then his life becomes perfect. On the other hand, if one simply executes the Vedic rituals without Krishna consciousness, then whatever he does is not going to be very perfect. He'll always have some kind of obligation. The perfect example is King Nriga. King Nriga, he tried so hard to do everything right. He's giving away in charity to the Brahmins because it is said that according to who you give charity to, you get a result of that, of the person's utilization of that charity. He didn't go on the street looking for drunkards to give charity to. He didn't give it indiscriminately. He gave it to persons who could actually utilize the charity for their benefit and for other people's benefit, to learned, qualified Brahmins. He gave away more cows in charity than the number of sands of grains on the beach. So anyone who wants to find out how many cows in charity he gave away, start now to count the number of grains of sand on the beach. It's quite a bit. Or the number of stars in the sky. And he gave them not just cows, but each one of the cows had gold-plated hooves and silver-plated horns and a nice silk wrapper. And not only he gave away cows in charity, he built roads and he dug wells. He did so many things in charity. Therefore, his pious activities were unlimited, and the amount of pious credit he had was also unlimited. Therefore, the amount of material enjoyment he'd receive in the heavenly planets was also unlimited. He tried to do everything perfectly perfect. Unfortunately, one time he gave away a cow in charity to one Brahmin, and that same cow wandered back into his herd, and he gave that cow away in charity to another Brahmin. So when the first Brahmin saw that his cow was now in the herd of the other Brahmin, he said, "Give me back my cow." He said, "No, the king gave it to me." He said, "No, the king gave it to me." And a quarrel ensued over that cow. Therefore the king went to both Brahmins and promised 100,000 cows in charity. He'd give 100,000 cows in charity to each Brahmin in exchange for that one cow. For the Brahmins were so much interested in that one cow and in fighting with each other that they refused. They didn't even hear the king. Instead, they both went away angry, cursing the king for the sinful activity of giving something in charity and taking it back. So at the end of his life, the king was brought before Yamaraj, and Yamaraj said, "Your pious activities are so unlimited, there's no end to your material enjoyment. Unfortunately, you've committed this sinful action, and therefore you'll have to receive some impious reactions. So which do you want first, your impious reactions or your pious activities?" So he thought, King Nriga thought, let me enjoy my pious activities undisturbed. So I'll take my impious reactions first. So at once Yamaraj turned him into a lizard, and he was put on the bottom of a well. And then he realized life in the material world is not so pleasant. Therefore, at that point, he began to remember Krishna. He began to chant Hare Krishna, meditate upon Krishna, and ultimately Krishna delivered him. No one could possibly follow the Vedic injunctions more carefully than King Nriga. Still, he wound up in a miserable situation, inadvertently, not even due to seemingly his own fault. But he actually became purified and joyful when he became Krishna conscious. Therefore, tyaktva dharman charnam bhujam harer bhajana pakvo yat yato pato yati yatra kwa vavajama buddha mushakim kovartak apto bhajatam sadharma taha. That one may perfectly execute his duty, tyaktva swadharmam charnam bhujam harer. One may give up his prescribed duty and take the devotional service. Bhajana pakvo ya patet yato yadi. And because he's not mature, he may fall down from his position of devotion. But what is the loss for him? Although he may not get such an as auspicious next birth as someone who very carefully performs his prescribed duties, but because he has executed something in Krishna consciousness, therefore he gets eternal benefit. He's progressed his life towards the eternal kingdom of Krishna. On the other hand, even one very perfectly performs his prescribed duties, and even he goes to the heavenly planets, but what is the real gain for him? Because ultimately he'll fall down from that position and wind up at zero, with no credit at all, no gain at all. So the purport is, if one wants to really be dutiful, if one wants to do the right thing, if one wants to do something beneficial, then he should engage himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness. And at the same time, one should not deviate from the rules and regulations of the Vedas. One should try to understand what is the proper way of acting in the material world so that people in general do not become disturbed, and at the same time one can most easily maintain his Krishna consciousness. So one has to act in the material world for the maintenance of his body, and according to one's own psychophysical nature, one should take shelter of the Vedas for such activities, but that is not sufficient for actual advancement. That in itself will have no real benefit unless one takes to the process of Krishna consciousness, by which one eventually comes to the platform of being able to fix his mind upon Krishna. Fixing the mind upon Krishna begins with the chanting of the holy name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But one also has to come to the platform of remembering Krishna, his form, his quality, his pastimes, and being able to do so in a loving mood, feeling Krishna's presence all the time. And therefore come to the platform of full consciousness and ecstasy. That's Krishna consciousness. Being ecstatic, or it's translated by Rupa Goswami as being realizing one's eternal nature, therefore always being very patient, and at the same time being actually conscious of Krishna fully, without any doubts, asamshaya samagram, and at the same time being fully enthusiastic, fully ecstatic in Krishna consciousness. That is the real benefit. So we'll stop there. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes. Well, Prabhupada was just pointing out that he didn't think, what does Krishna want me to do? He thought, what is good for my sense gratification? That's typical material calculation. Everyone wants to enjoy sense gratification, and everyone wants to avoid those things that disturb sense gratification. Therefore, such an activity is not Krishna conscious, it's simply material. But when he was put into a suffering condition, he came to his senses and began to remember Krishna. And because of his absorption in Krishna consciousness, Krishna came and picked him out of the well. Not because he gave cows away in charity, or he did anything pious that Krishna came. It's simply because he became absorbed in Krishna consciousness as a frog. A lizard, actually. Yeah, that's the advantage of living in the Veda culture. There's so much Krishna consciousness. Although people take it as an avenue for their sense gratification. Therefore Krishna says, akamo sarva karma va moksha kamo dharadi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusha para. That in any condition of life, that one should take to Krishna consciousness, whether one has full of desires or wants liberation or has no desire, one should somehow or another take to the process. So Veda culture is like that. It says, yes, worship Vishnu and you get all your desires fulfilled. So he was pious enough, he was a devotee of Vishnu, of the Brahmins and the cows. Therefore he got some Krishna consciousness. But the idea is he wanted elevation to the heavenly planets. But when he was put into the suffering condition of a lizard, he realized, I'm just wasting my time in the material world. There's no end to the suffering here. There's no pure happiness here. And therefore he gave up his idea of material happiness and simply took to Krishna consciousness. It wasn't that he was a lizard in the well and someone came along and sold him a book in the well and he began to read it and realized this was a miserable condition. There's no opportunity like that. Simply because he was in the Vedic culture previously, he got that opportunity. Most lizards in wells, they didn't have that background. Therefore, they're not Krishna conscious. Anything else? All right, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Prem.